Greetings, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Gemini Svamsa. The sage Gemini gives the phrase itches and stoutness / density. And so the ability for these people to develop throughout their life is discrimination between useful and wasteful mental activity. And as you're going to see during this presentation, we're experiencing a major Gemini Svamsa crisis worldwide. So not only will these attributes and characteristics apply to a person with Gemini Svamsa, everything I'm talking about can be applied to most people because of the influence of the internet and the influence of technologies. And it has so much to do with ideology and how people spend their time intellectually and mentally, what they spend their time thinking about. These are all major themes of Gemini. It's an air sign. And so everybody can gain from understanding more about the Gemini Svamsa and the challenges that a Gemini Svamsa presents. The unique challenges for these specific people, but I've noticed in general, this sign specifically is really important for everyone to understand. And it's really no surprise that so many people that are interested in astrology and who do astrology have a strong Mercury, a strong Gemini presence in their chart. Specifically, I get a lot of clients who are Gemini Svamsas. And so as a quick review, to find the Svamsa, you find the Atmakaraka, the planet with the highest degrees in the chart. Find out where that planet lands in the Navamsa chart, the D9 chart. And you can use the graph in the description of this video to easily find your Svamsa sign. So people with Gemini Svamsa, first of all, the first word is itches. And so what is an itch? An itch is an irritation, usually on your skin. And Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, rules our skin, rules the coverings of things. So when something is itching, it is an overactivity of mental activity. Something's irritating you. You can't get something out of your head. So these people, Gemini Svamsas, they can be nervous people in the sense that they have so much activity happening mentally that things become irritating to them. They can't release something. They can't be content with an idea. They're always tweaking or working at making better some kind of idea that they have. It's not quite perfect enough, or they're trying to manipulate that idea to make it work just for them, or they're just always playing with ideas in their heads. And over time, this becomes an itch. This becomes an irritation. They're always needing some kind of mental stimulation to satisfy or to help them calm themselves down. And a lot of times itches are, well, they're usually something that is unwanted. We don't want to be itching all the time, or it's some kind of an uneasiness in general. And that means the ideas and concepts in their head haven't been manifested. And we're going to really go into a little bit later about how to solve these Gemini problems. And that has everything to do with making it real, making it concrete, making it manifested in your life, and not just having something that's that needs to go away, feeling like you need something to go away. Well, the way to make it go away is to make it become real, or you have to discard it. You have to detoxify that idea, that ideology from your system. In the same way that an itch, it's your body attempting to get rid of something, and it comes through the skin. And so the ideas that hang around in people's heads, they, like I said, they can't get rid of them. And so Gemini Svamsa people, they're such learning-orientated people. That's why they're so interested in astrology. And they're very educationally minded. They like facts. They like getting new information, bringing it into their head. It's very interesting. They're very curious about knowing new things. What happens is that they become overwhelmed with all of this information. Not everyone can contain so much information in their system at one time. And so what that happens is an overwhelming amount of possibilities that they'll hold on to for too long, because Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is all about experimenting with life and finding what can work and what maybe won't work, and trying those possibilities out. What happens with Gemini Svamsa, they see so many possibilities open, and they're curious about all of them. And that brings us to the ability that these people have the challenge of, and that word is discrimination. And that word has had its meaning changed in the past couple decades. The word discrimination, it's considered a very negative term because you don't want to make other people feel unwanted, or you don't want to send bad energy to other people by discriminating against them. But taken alone, that word discrimination is simply saying that you need to begin to separate things in your life. You need to discriminate between an idea that is useful or unuseful. And in terms of people, not everyone is going to be someone quote unquote useful to your life. And other people will be extremely useful to your life. If you don't have any sense of discrimination, what happens is you just become overwhelmed again with possibilities. You become overwhelmed with information. Take, for example, the internet. The internet is this vast resource, and if you don't discriminate between what you should be spending your time on the internet doing, and you just do anything, you end up losing a lot of time, and you spend a lot of mental energy investigating, looking into things that aren't really making your life better or helping you move forward in your life and what you need to do for your life. And that's what the Svamsa sign is all about. How is my life improving, and is this the right thing for me to do now? Without the ability to discriminate, you're saying yes to everything. And that's a big trait of a Gemini Svamsa person, is that they're saying yes to life all the time. And they need to learn how to start to say no. No, I'm not going to go down that path. Or no, that person, although I love that person, or although that person is really interesting, it's just not going to make my life go where I want it to go. And these people need to hone in on what they need to do and say yes to only certain things in their life and not say yes to everything. So it's that ability to use the word no. It's a really key word for them. So when I say discrimination, it really helps to start to deconstruct or take that negative way of looking at that word and turn it into a really positive attribute. Being able to discriminate is a sign of high intelligence, because you can see what things are valid or factual, what things aren't. And what you're doing is you're discriminating out what's not true or what is true. And it's a really positive word. You just have to learn to use it. And it's a sign, like I said, a sign of high intelligence, being able to see, yeah, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. You're not just saying, yeah, I don't discriminate, therefore everything is good, everything is acceptable to me. Not everything is going to be healthy for you moving forward. Some things are going to be unhealthy for you, and you have to discriminate between what is healthy, what is right for you, and then move forward. Gemini, its place, each sign has a realm, so to say, a location, and Gemini is the city. And what is a city? The city is packed with people. Gemini is the first sign that we get from Gemini who doesn't use an animal creature to describe it. And Gemini is it's a boy and a girl. And so that boy and a girl, it's two human beings. And that two human beings shows the sociability of this sign. And the place of Gemini is the city. And cities have the most amount of people packed into one place. And what do cities have? They have an overwhelming amount of possibilities to them. Every day you can wake up and try a new restaurant, or every day you can go and do a new activity. That one word to sum up cities would be possibilities. There's so many things that you can do because you have access to so much information, to so many people. And that's again a major theme for humanity nowadays. We're packed into cities. The world is at our fingertips kind of mentality. And it's a good and a bad thing. So all I want to say in this part is that if you really think about Gemini, and especially Svamsas, but in general all people, we become overwhelmed with stimulation, basically, because of the overwhelming amount of possibilities. And this ends up deteriorating the mind little by little, because we're not meant to do everything. We can't read every book. We can't learn every skill. Some people, they'll spend their life learning and learning and learning. And if that feels right for them, that feels right. That can be a really healthy Gemini Svamsa. We'll get into it in a little bit, but making those abilities practical and beneficial for other people and for yourself is key. But you have to be very aware of what is useful and what is unuseful, or what is just a waste of my mental energy to invest in. And so cities can become these hives of overstimulation. And you can be living not in a city, but you can have a city mindset where it just becomes too much to handle, essentially. One good thing that Gemini Svamsa people have within their life is versatility. They can switch gears and have interests in a lot of different things. And this is a very positive trait. These people can be very good at managing other people, being able to put their perspective put themselves into the shoes of another person and be empathetic in that sense. They can see how that person sees the world, and that makes them good managers of other people, also managers of information. The versatility makes them good at business. They can see how the economic flows of a system work, and using their ability for analysis and analytical expertise makes them good understanding how business works, how other people want to trade. This is another good skill of a Gemini Svamsa, and especially technical abilities. And technical abilities are specialized areas of knowledge. And a really strong Gemini is really good at one specific thing. They're not trying to do everything. And having a lot of technical expertise, say, especially Gemini rules our arms and our hands. So artisans are people that can use their hands and have a really specific ability that they're good at. Gemini people can really hone in on a single thing and master that single thing, because a good way to think about it is, in terms of Gemini Svamsa, is the jack of all trades but master of none. If you've heard that phrase, it means, oh wow, this person is so good at so many things, but they're not a master at one thing, and that one thing is going to push them ahead in life. A stronger or healthier Gemini can be a jack of all trades and a master of some, which is saying that, yeah, they're interested in everything, but they're able to hone in on, say, a couple really important things that they're really especially good at and master those things. It doesn't have to just be one thing. It can be many things, and you're a master of some of those things. Ideally, it's just one, and then there's branches off, but you can really focus in on the technical information and knowledge of a single pursuit that you have in your life. And this is partially why Gemini has so many celebrities have Gemini Svamsas. And it's because a celebrity is good at one single thing. And when I say celebrities, a lot of times we think of movie stars and people we find in media. Well, Gemini is the natural third house of entertainment and performance. And so the entertainment industry, it does attract a lot of Gemini Svamsa people. So many actors and so many people in production and media in general have this Gemini Svamsa because they're so good with interactivity between people, interpersonal skills and social skills, which comes from the air element of Gemini. So they're good at seeing and negotiating between other people, and they're able to take advantage of their ability for interpersonal understanding along with a really specific technical skill and advance in the world and climb the ladder, because they can navigate the economic worlds that Mercury is the ruler of. And so these celebrities, these famous people, they have skills that rise above the rest of the population, and they have a specific craft that they're honing in on. And Mercury is an androgynous planet in Vedic astrology, and androgynous planets, Saturn and Mercury, what they do is that let's stick with Mercury. Saturn's a little bit different of an androgynous planet. When you have a balance between your masculine and your feminine side, when there is not one stronger than the other, a really healthy Mercury that creates a balance between your ability to listen and your ability to act. And Gemini Svamsa people, or people with strong Mercuries, they have a balanced way of going about the world. They can have a very attractive appearance. They have a symmetry to their whole system, but there's symmetry to their appearance, which is another way that people with Gemini Svamsas get ahead in the world, is that they're attractive people. They have a balance. When you think of a movie star, you're looking at their face for an hour and a half. You would want to look at attractive and intriguing and charismatic characters on screen. That's why these people become so world famous, is because they have an attractive physique. And even traditionally ugly people, or people without as symmetrical faces, they can have an inner charisma that attracts you to them because you're engaging with them for so long. And so a healthy Gemini Svamsa will make a person personable in that way. It doesn't have to be classic notions of attractiveness, but they have a balance to the way that they move about into the world. And that comes from Mercury's androgynous aspect. And as I said, the third house is the natural. Gemini is the natural third house. Third house is performance. Where do we see the most performances? In cities. Gemini. It's a very human activity. The theater, drama. All of these are things that naturally are interesting to Gemini Svamsa people. Two actresses that stuck out to me as I was looking and researching were Michelle Pfeiffer and Naomi Watts. And these are two actresses who really have a skill in diving into their characters, and they're not just a pretty face to look at. And a huge part of Gemini Svamsa and the Gemini way of going about the world is personas. Personas are different characters that can exist within a single person. And an actor, what are they doing? They're putting on the mask of another person. They're putting on the covering of another. They're imitating and portraying the state, the psychological and physical state of another being. And so Gemini Svamsa people can have really strong abilities to imitate other people and emulate them, and put on that mask, put on that persona of another for a little while, and then switch out to your regular persona. So this is it's the central core reason of an actor. It's what an actor's ability is, to become another person for a period of time. And that's all Gemini skills. That's Mercury, that's becoming, that's imitating. You're trying on another personality for a little while, and you're experimenting with how that other person sees the world. The difficulty for a Gemini Svamsa person, say an unhealthy Gemini Svamsa, is the idea of manipulation. And manipulation is not giving your true intentions, and it's putting on a show in order to get what you want. So someone who's acting isn't really telling you or demonstrating who they really are. They're demonstrating a side of them or a persona in order to achieve something. So if you're on the stage and performing a play, what you're trying to achieve is the authentic portrayal of that piece, of that story. A manipulative Gemini person is going to be using the ability to become another person and to put on a mask in order to achieve aims that they're not being forward about. And so it's something to be aware of with a Gemini Svamsa person, and very unhealthy, is that tendency towards manipulation and imitation for the purpose of satisfying one's ego's desires. And they can really step into other people's shoes and tell people what they want to hear. And that comes from that charm and charisma. But underneath, what's happening? Are they putting on a mask? Are they somehow tricking people into thinking something about them? So it's an important thing to remember, is what mask. Think about social media, media, entertainment, all Gemini activities. You're making a persona on that account. Is that who you really are? They become so used to having a digital identity, and that's not who you really are deep down in your personal life. And it can become so dangerous over time, because not only will other people eventually discover that what you're saying isn't true or what you really think or believe, but eventually you hollow yourself out. and you become, your persona that you present becomes so detached from what you really think and who you really are that you can lose yourself within the different personas, and you end up losing a sense of your true identity. These are all things that Gemini people with overstimulated minds and overactivity mentally can suffer from. And there's this kind of, what is the face? Gemini doesn't rule the face, but when we put on masks, we're putting on these personas and we're putting on these characters and we're portraying certain ideologies that may not necessarily be our own. And some people that have Gemini Svamsa is Ted Turner, who the CEO and creator of CNN. What is he doing? He's hiring people, he's hiring personas to put on television to tell people information. And that information that they're telling has a corporate motivation. It's not necessarily what these people actually think. So he's a manager of personas, or he used to be. I don't know if he's running the day-to-day he doesn't run the day-to-day operations, but that's what a news network is doing. It's giving off information from personas that are attractive and maybe have a charisma, but they don't necessarily believe in those things. Ideally, a journalist will have will be saying what they actually believe, but that's not how we experience the corporate news today. You have Walter Cronkite, one of the most likable newsmen of all time. He had a kind of a charm that was an everyday person's shtick in a kind of way. He was very likable. He was very charismatic, but in a very normal person's way. So he was able to be attractive, or he was able to appeal to many types of different people. But did he really believe all the things he was saying, or was his persona just that, a persona to tell people what they're just reading teleprompters? Do they really believe those things? So this is a danger of Gemini Svamsa people, is, am I just imitating something that I think other people want to hear, see, and say, or hear and understand, or am I really coming from the heart? Do I really believe ideologically the things that I'm portraying? News anchor people these days, you couldn't say that they're not going off the script. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they really believe what they're saying, but a lot of times they're just reading teleprompters and they're just reading what the news tells them to say that day. Another person would be J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director who had a very controversial career, and he was very much against, I believe, Southern integration. He was a very racist person. He discriminated in a negative way, and he saw certain people as lower than other people. He didn't see everyone as an equal, and he used his power in the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to cause problems for the livelihoods of other people. What's interesting about him is that he had blackmail on him, cross-dressing in his office. So this guy, this bigot who was against the alternative lifestyles of the different cultures, and he was using power to maintain a very oppressive regime within the United States government. He was cross-dressing. There was a persona that he wasn't revealing to other people. I mean, it's not uncommon that people have this very intense hatred for other people inside. It's a self-hatred because they are those people, and they hate that part of themselves. So that's a whole different topic of taking the hate out of your system. But he was dressing up as a woman and wearing dresses in his office, but at the same time, he hated those people. So he had a persona that he was not showing to other people. And he's a public figure. And that was a very, he had blackmail on him. So he was being controlled, you could say, by the people who had that blackmail on him. But as you can see, there were personas within him that he was afraid to reveal to other people that worked to his disadvantage. But he's another example of somebody who public persona is different from a private persona. And as we're talking about so many of these entertainment industry people, Gemini is Mercury is an androgynous planet. Gemini, Svamsa, and Mercury give this youthfulness, and gives this curiosity, gives this playful mentality. And when you mix that in with celebrity culture, what you have is the obsession with youth. And you have this obsession with being young and not wanting to ever grow up. Mercury is always playing. It's always wanting to see what's new. And that kind of curiosity is typical of a young person. Gemini is the sign of our early life education, our primary school education, when we're learning the facts of life, when we learn how things work, mathematics, the structure of further learning to come, the basics of reading, and how to acquire knowledge, those skills. And someone with an unhealthy Gemini Svamsa is going to be obsessed with keeping that mind state for their whole life in an unhealthy way, and that's always trying to be youthful, not wanting to mature gracefully and to age gracefully. They want to be seen as this young person at all times, and they become obsessed with that, obsession with youth, obsession with newness and the shiny brand new thing. And a person that sadly exemplified this was Michael Jackson, a Gemini Svamsa. Michael Jackson, one of the best performers of all time. He was attractive. He was an amazing singer. He was so versatile. Think about the way he could move his body on a dance floor. All Gemini attributes. His downfall came from the fact that he lost his youth because he was always training and doing adult entertainment business activities when he was a kid, a very young kid. I think he started when he was 5. That he lost his youth, and so he became obsessed with what he lost. And he had all that controversy about having children into his dominion, his world, his Neverland, his place where kids don't ever grow up. And that's just one very extreme case of a Gemini Svamsa never wanting to be seen as an older person. They want to always be portrayed as this youthful person. What did he do? He totally changed his face. He became another person. He lost himself into another persona. There are a lot of other very successful actors and entertainment personalities who don't have that same kind of major dark side, but they are very youthful people for their whole life. And that's because they're always so curious about learning new things. One of them is Anthony Bourdain. He was such a great educator about food culture throughout the world. And he had a very strong chart, a very strong Gemini Svamsa, but also he had a very strong Gemini in his natal chart. And he was someone who was great at bringing out information, taking information from places around the world, an insatiable curiosity, and then portraying it to other people in a wide format, in an entertaining way. Another person is Orson Welles. Orson Welles was a phenom at a very young age for his ability to do Shakespeare, for his acting abilities, but that was a man who could take on another person's persona with extreme versatility and amazing skill, and he was always had a new project going. So he's another person who, like I said, with Naomi Watts and Michelle Pfeiffer, these are people who aren't just beautiful people. They are people who have a really strong ability for gathering knowledge, really strong Gemini Svamsas, and be able to turn their curiosity into something that is practical for other people to engage with as well. It's not just a swarm of ideas in their mind. And so what happens when the Svamsa is negative, the Gemini Svamsa, the people are getting overwhelmed with facts, overwhelmed with information, too many hobbies, way too many desires, and that's all the air element. And they can, on the surface, oftentimes seem very happy-go-lucky, and they're drawing people into them. But what separates a successful Gemini Svamsa from an unsuccessful or a tortured, a mentally distraught kind of Gemini Svamsa person is the ability to turn that interactivity into something practical and into concrete life. And this is because Mercury is an Earth planet. Mercury makes things real, and Mercury actualizes things when it's working healthily. And so what we want to do when we have all of these ideas, we want to put it to paper, so to say. We want to manifest our ideas. We want to take our ideology and live that ideology out. We want to walk the walk. And this partially has to do with Gemini being a dual sign. Dual signs are constantly upgrading things. They're making things better. They're tweaking and improving things. And that is best done when it's in the real world. And an idea is working on paper, or that idea is working in practice, and not just an idea that works perfectly on paper, but when you bring it out and you manifest it into that concrete reality, it falls apart. And a person with an exceptional Gemini Svamsa was Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla explained that what he was able to do is he was able to work out all of his ideas in his mind and manifest them in an elegant way where he didn't have to do many experiments. He was able to use the ability to compartmentalize information and work things out into his head. He had such a strong ability for mental cognizance and intelligence that he didn't have to experiment and try things out in the practical world. So when you think about scientists, a lot of times they're trying things out and it fails. They try things out and it fails. Nikola Tesla was able to really work things out before he had to experiment with them in the real world. And all of that was happening within his head. So he was able to make real things, and he was able to take all of this flowing energy and in an extraordinary way make it useful to other people. He was an inventor. He brought the world of alternative current electricity into, we all use his invention nowadays. His rival, Thomas Edison, his direct current system, the centralized current, failed. And Thomas Edison was an experimenter. It's a really controversial story, and it's really interesting when you learn about Edison and Tesla. But Edison was someone that was always tweaking in the real world. He didn't have that kind of same elegance of understanding and able to separate and discriminate between what was practical and useful and what was unuseful, and then hone that in and manifest it directly. So there's a very strong possibility, or a very strong ability for Gemini Svamsa people to be capable of brilliance and to be able to, their world is centered around intellectualism, and they're able to really put forward great ideas and to really contribute to the world in a concrete way because of their ability for brilliance. People with a harmed Gemini Svamsa, one example would be, and this example can kind of go either way, it's Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein is known for his brilliance, and his Gemini Svamsa, the health of it was, as I say, so-so, because what he was able to do is put brilliant ideas on paper, but in the real world. So the world and the subject of quantum mechanics was created from his theory. The only problem with quantum mechanics is that it's an attempt to redefine reality in scientific language, but what Einstein did is he removed the ether element from his calculations. So nowadays, in order to accommodate for reality, the structure of reality still working, they had to invent dark matter. And every year, quantum physics moves into another realm of impracticality, things that don't make our lives better. It's not the same as a mechanic who's able to fix something, or an engineer that uses science and uses formulas and uses information in the practical world. Quantum mechanics is just endlessly playing with possibilities, endlessly experimenting with what the fabric of reality is. And that's because it took away the fundamental point of ether. Ether is the undetectable, unmeasurable fabric that links all of reality together. It's the fifth element. The dark matter is basically trying to say, oh, there's all of this matter that we don't understand, and every year the quantum physicists are just playing, wow, there's so much we don't know. Well, the ancients knew a lot more, and they were able to use that information because they didn't try to take away one of the elements from the fundamental fabric of reality. So now quantum physicists, they say, well, there's all this dark matter. What is it? We don't know what it is. It's this mystery, and let's all marvel at the mystery. It's the ether, and it was taken away from, Einstein took it away from his calculations, and the science of quantum mechanics is founded on his equations. So Albert Einstein's, his idea was brilliant according to these people, but it doesn't have any practical reality. it has to keep reinventing itself in order to fit the equation. So on paper, yeah, it's working, but concretely, it's not moving humanity forward. You don't use quantum mechanics to make things. You use quantum mechanics to theorize, and it's just stuck in this theoretical realm. And that's what what happens to a Gemini Svamsa when it gets lost in its ability to play with ideas. Nothing really becomes real. Nothing goes to the earth. Nothing gets manifested. And that's what that mental world of Gemini, and it becomes this itch. Gemini calls it itches. That's the word he uses. It's this constant, nothing ever gets completed in the world of quantum mechanics. So it's so key for these people, Gemini Svamsa, not to just be always playing around with ideas and theories. They need to contribute to real life, and so in a way that other people can benefit from it. And the most productive way to do that is first discriminate, not have an excess of ideas, but also to separate your ideas from yourself and to let the ideas live on their own and not be defined by your idea. And it comes in regular life today is people, they say, I am a communist or I am a capitalist. Are you, or are you something else? Or is that just your ideology? So it's really important to not over-identify with your ideas and not over-identify with how you see the world. And it's just a mental construct you have in your head. You have to separate those two. If you don't separate them, it causes irritation because then you're limiting yourself to an ideology. So it's another challenge of Gemini Svamsa people not to become limited through what they believe and what their ideology tells them who they are. You're not that idea. A Gemini Svamsa person can get too caught up in that world, and that's what happens with astrology. People say, I am a Gemini, I am a Cancer rising, I am this. No, that's your chart. That's your temporary manifestation in a body in this lifetime. You are not that thing. That is an energetic makeup of you, but you're bigger than that. You are infinite possibilities. So in astrology, a Gemini Svamsa person, they can get too tied into these definitions, into these constructs, and you don't want to limit yourself into these constructs like that. And you want to be able to expand and not limit yourself. Some people, a couple artists that stood out as Gemini Svamsas to me that were excellent at being able to play with ideas in a constructive way that helps people think about their life differently. One is Michel Duchamp, and the other is Robert Rauschenberg. These are two conceptual artists that really helped to push the modern art world forward into thinking about what representative art is. Michel Duchamp especially was excellent because he opened up the world, the conceptual. He basically began conceptual art and with his objects, and one was the idea that something is a work of art because the artist says it is, and that decision is the only thing that matters. So he put the urinal on a pedestal, and I think it was destroyed the first time around, but he put another one, and that urinal he called a fountain, and just that decision alone to call it art opened up all of these possibilities for people. Wow, art is what? It's the artist's decision alone to call it art. Say what you want what that turned art into, or say what you want about how that maybe conceptually turned art into a direction that became destructive or wasn't helpful. But Marcel Duchamp did a lot more with conceptual art than almost any other artist. And that's because he could really twist ideas and put them into a figurative form and say, this is something, and then it makes you think, is that something? So it can kind of test the mental activity of others. And as I said, if you're able to play with ideas and then represent those ideas in unique ways, but never say, I am that, you can have a freedom to experiment because you're never isolating yourself into a certain realm or a certain world. And that's the really key part about a healthy Svamsa, is being able to separate yourself from ideologies. And so the other words that Gemini uses for describing Gemini, I only talked about itches, but the other is density. and stoutness. Density really means dense with ideas, dense with concepts. There's so many things, and what it does is it creates compactness. And that compactness creates weight. And so sometimes Gemini Svamsa people, they can gain weight because they're not allowed to gain weight in an unhealthy sense, have an unhealthy bodily weight because they're taking in too much information and they're not able to expel that information. One person who embodied this idea of stoutness and density was Orson Welles, who I was talking about earlier. Orson was hot on the scene when he was as a teenager. He was all over New York doing radio shows. He became famous by, I think, 21, 22 years old. He was already very well known in the drama industry. As he got older, people were saying his best works were behind him, and he struggled to complete films later in his life. It was hard for him to bring money in and to finish his films because they were considered too experimental. But he embodied this perfectly. He gained a lot of weight, and he became a big guy. He was a dense guy. And to his credit, he used his weight to his advantage. He would take on these roles, and he would really exaggerate his own body size. It was quite brilliant, actually. And so, as you can see in these photos, he exaggerated this quality of himself, and he gave himself a lot of robustness, and he used it to his own advantage. But he's, again, an example of a person who became so dense with information, with ideas, with experience, he didn't get a lot out. And he was known for having not completed many of the things that he wanted to do, many of the projects that he wanted to do. He struggled in the second half of his life to manifest what he really was envisioning. And I think it was because he just had too many thoughts, too many ideas, and too many desires that were practical. And it ended up showing in his body size. Comes this dense ball of information of tightness because they need to let those ideas be flowing constantly. You can't just accumulate. There needs to be a flow outwards as well. That manifestation process is the huge key of Gemini Svamsa. It's not just discriminate, because if you're only taking in what's good for you and then you're able to manifest that information, you're in a healthy flow of Gemini Svamsa. If you're not discriminating, you're just bringing in everything, and then you're not then able, and then that also affects your ability to manifest. You're just taking in and becoming dense. And the other word Gemini uses is stout. So it's all about these people having the challenge of accumulating too much and then not being able to manifest it back outwards and expel, detoxify ideas that you don't need, but also manifest ideas that are helpful and useful to other people. So a Gemini Svamsa person literally can have an unhealthy weight, an itchiness, and diseases that revolve around overactivity and overstimulation that makes them become static. A stout person isn't as versatile, isn't as dynamic. They become more and more stationary and stagnant because they're not letting things flow. Think of Mercury. He has the winged feet. He has the winged shoes. He's able to fly and he's able to move around. He's able to adapt. He's able to make things better. A stout, dense person, the challenge of Gemini Svamsa, they're just not able to let their life flow in a healthy way. And this is what makes people feel stuck. They don't see what they need and they don't see what they don't need. A lot of what they have in their mental world and in their body, they're bringing in all this energy, needs to get detoxed out. It needs to be discriminated out. It needs to be removed from their self so that they can become more swift on their feet. They can become more light on their feet, and they can really adapt to situations and take in only what's useful to them. One person that had this problem was Brian Wilson. He was the lead singer of the Beach Boys. And people nowadays, they think of the Beach Boys, is this the first boy band? Well, the lead singer and the composer of all of that music, he was a brilliant, brilliant musician. Still alive, I believe. Still alive. You think of the Beach Boys, and even I thought, that's just that like lovey-dovey surfer band. Well, if you look into who Brian Wilson was, he was an unbelievably talented musician who could hear melodies, and he was a composer. He was a brilliant musician in the true sense of the word. and that got expressed into the music he made. But he became this intense situation where he was so overstimulated by his success, he couldn't manifest his ideas anymore. He became hopelessly addicted to drugs, pills, I believe. He spent, I think, 2 years in his bedroom, never left. People were really worried about him. He was suicidal. He had so many ideas. He was so dense, and he became big. He gained weight. He became so overwhelmed with the mental activity in his mind that he couldn't get any of it out anymore. And he stopped making albums. He stopped recording the music. And even though his wife, there's a great documentary about his struggles, but his wife says, his current wife would go downstairs and he's playing the piano in the middle of the night, and the melodies that he's evoking, improvising and singing are unbelievable. And this kind of music would not only would it be commercially successful, but it would make people think about music in new ways. He's able to manifest it, but he could never go the next steps and make it practical for other people to enjoy. So he had so much mental activity, it ended up becoming so dense within him, he couldn't get out of it, and he became stuck, became suicidal. And he's a really interesting story, but he's a Gemini Svamsa that became so unhealthy physically, but unhealthy mentally. And he was in a terrible, dark place for much of his life. As I said, addicted to drugs and drinking. But it's just this overstimulated, overactive mental world that has trouble with putting things down into taking it off the page and putting it into reality, and then improving our world with that. And so it's this major process of Gemini Svamsa of decluttering, where these people are always in the need of decluttering their mind, not to become stout and dense with too many things going on within them at one time. This over accumulation of details that at a certain point, the essential, the core, the real truth, it becomes lost. When a person over-identifies with their ideas, with their ideology, how they see the world, they take in too many ideas, what is the core of what they're trying to express? It becomes overwhelmed with details. It becomes impractical. It's harder for them to return to that core, because that meaning, what they really want, what they really desire to express, becomes overwhelmed by too many other less useful things that are just going to end up wasting their time. So a Gemini Svamsa really needs to practice at maintaining that core meaning and that essential truth that is guiding their activity, that they're really working to manifest in their life, and to not let all the extraneous details accumulate into this ball of information that they can't ever use. So now we'll talk a little bit about the planets. We look at in the Svamsa what planets are exalted and debilitated in that sign to see the other characteristics of what that Svamsa gives. So there are no planets exalted, debilitated, Mula Trikona, or Mula Trikona. Mula Trikona is the second best position for a planet to be in. No planets do exceptionally well in Gemini. No planets do exceptionally poorly in Gemini, which means that every planet has more or less of an opportunity to use the investigative qualities of Gemini in order to create a life that works and to able to experiment with life. So every planet is able to, in more or less an equal way, explore the world of experimenting with things that really express who you are. The best planet to have in Gemini is, of course, Mercury. It's his own sign. Saturn is the second best planet to have in Saturn, and that is because Saturn and Mercury are mutual friends. They both like each other's presence, and a person with a healthy Gemini Svamsa is going to be a person that is able to disregard distractions, someone that's able to take things away that don't have meaning to them, and unrealistic thoughts. These are positive traits of a Saturn in Gemini. Things that just aren't practical, things that are too airy, things that are not grounded. Saturn is able to remove and take things away that are unuseful or can help a person see what ideas or what concepts will become a waste of time, and able to see that an idea or concept has a long-term vitality to it that can work over long periods of time. Saturn, the slowest moving planet, visible planet, is able to have that long-term view of something. And so Is this idea, does it have durability? Is it going to work over the long haul? Or it's not just a temporary flash in the pan, wow, exciting. Mercury and Gemini can be too much of that. Wow, exciting, curious, boom, 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 boom. We want to take that Saturn quality and make it work for a longer period of time. And that ability for good communication that is direct, and communication that isn't using too many words. Saturn can be very direct and simple in communication. That's another positive sign of a good Gemini, a good Gemini Svamsa. So positive Gemini Svamsa, lifelong learners, very educationally minded, quick thinkers. They can conceptualize ideas, put them into their groups, and use them when they're necessary. They're not grouping everything together and not separating. You got to have compartmentalization is a very strong ability of a Gemini Svamsa person. And the ability to use one's hands in useful ways and create a technical ability or be able to master a technical ability. And playful people, friendly and social people, people that are charismatic and all used to a positive end so that you're bringing people together and finding commonalities between people. Social interactions that generate other positive results. And dealing with the Gemini Svamsas, dealing with the overactive mind is all about detoxifying ideas that aren't useful, detoxifying patterns of thinking that are not leading them on a way that is going to be beneficial for their life. It's really just walking down a path that you take an idea too far, and then you got to turn around and you see, oh wow, that whole pattern of thinking was so unuseful. You have to be able to discriminate those patterns of thoughts at the beginning and not waste minutes, hours, days, years, decades down a path that ends up being a waste of time. And it starts with the habitual pattern of thinking. So having ability to recognize and discriminate, is this going to be beneficial to my life? And that is going to bring about clarity and clarity of purpose, and that challenge of life of being clear thinking is a huge Gemini thing. And that means being able to be very specific and not allowing too many influences to come into your world. Discriminate between what you should or shouldn't bring in. Don't be afraid to say no. Say yes when it's proper, but think about what you're saying yes to. And say no and just say, I just can't put myself into another project right now. I got to finish this one first. Oh, wow, that project looks great. You can't take on another one right now. And that can go in so many types of contexts, so many types of situations. Learn to say no. It's a very much needed attribute for these people. Learn to say no in a healthy way so that you don't become overwhelmed. Negative Svamsas of Gemini, which is when there are planets in bad dignity in that Svamsa in the D9 chart, over time they just get worn out and their thoughts become more and more of a burden. Their thoughts and their ability that they thought were good at the time, being able to take in so many ideas, it just becomes this curse, and they become these dense, stout, difficult to move people, and they are just over-identifying with the ideas that they've brought in over time. And you can think of like a kind of a professor who becomes so rigid in the way they're thinking because they've taken in so much information over a period of time, over their life, about a specific topic, that becomes so dense and packed in with ideas that if what they think is then proven incorrect, they can't change, they can't move, and they can't be versatile and move on their feet. They can't switch their ideology. It's painful to see that your life's work was a waste of time or, partially incorrect, but what are you going to do? You have to be able to adapt to that. So as a review, the ability of discrimination is the most important part for these people. They're not allowing data to overwhelm them, information to make their lives feel like this major burden. And what they're really going for is to find truth in their life. What is true for them and what is making their life better and what is moving their path forward. And be able to separate what's useful and unuseful for each specific person. And the healthier the person is able to choose what is useful and able to fit into their intellectual world, into their ideology, the more clearly they're going to be able to see truthful things all around them at all times. They're going to be able to see that everything has its granule of truth, but that not everything is worthwhile for them personally to investigate. So at one point, it's beautiful to see that there's truth everywhere, but then it's necessary that they don't have such a short-sighted view of what is worth my time and energy to invest in intellectually. Okay, so that was Gemini Svamsa, and everything I just said you can really apply to most people because we're being inundated with information at all times. And all of these thoughts that I was putting forward, they can be really taken by almost anybody and applied. If you're hooked into the internet, if you spend too much time in media, we are all being blasted with ideas all the time. We have to learn how to remove some things from our life because they're just not benefiting us. The only reason that it's in your life is because you have a device giving you that information. Learn how to separate yourself from influences that when you think about, yeah, it's not making my life any better. I just feel bad, or I just feel like at the end of the day I wasted so much time. You have to learn to discriminate between what you need and what you don't need. Okay, next we'll be talking about the Svamsa of Cancer, so stay tuned.